this is accurate,
I'm going to be cooking the biggest humble pancakes Carlos Sainz has ever seen. All the while, Audi is busy making moves of their own without Sainz. But seriously, this entire operation has been anything but smooth. Even though there is a back and forth situation regarding the future of Carlos Sainz, Audi has decided to start the process of getting things ready for their full-fat debut in 2026 anyway. Even though it was expected that they would keep their distance until the last race of 2025, when Sauber would be no more, and Audi would assume full control of the F1 operation and go from there, changing their identity completely. Because they wouldn't even put their logo on the car. That was crazy. They were being so anonymous. And the results over the last couple of years for the Alfa Romeo Sauber group have been really anonymous as well. So, hey, I guess they were a match made in heaven. But since they committed 100% to the project, they've been energized. They want to move forward. They've been proactive, even though it's been a little bit rocky in places, but they're looking to the future quite brightly. Much how I'm looking brightly to the future of this channel. And by setting up a Patreon, I can breed a whole new generation of fan addicts. My wife came up with that one. I'm really proud of that one, as well as what we can offer you community members as well. But for the moment, we're keeping it quite basic. We want to make sure that we can get things right further down the line. But right now, we can think about polls, working out about drivers of the day, future live streams perhaps, post sessions, as well as finding other ways to engage with you, the fine members who are paying attention to my professional yapping on top of the ladder. But either way, any contribution, or even just giving the time of day to consider it, would be greatly appreciated. We're kind of pulling an Audi in a way, taking our time to ensure that what we've got in store for you for the future will be as good as we possibly can make it. And if you'd like to, go and take a look at the pinned comment if you're curious. Much like how I'm curious as to see where this is going to go for Audi. And why Sauber has discovered this newfound vigour and leaving their current drivers as bystanders in the midst of a very troubled start to their season, with pit stops being a complete and utter joke. There was a reason though why this was necessary, because they didn't suddenly just get bad over the winter break. They were already bad. It's just Alfa Romeo was so incredibly anonymous and they weren't painted in fluorescent green that we didn't notice. They have been looking into this problem and they have got a fix coming up for Miami and Imola, so I think they've resolved the problem at this point, but the damage has been done. It has potentially affected both Bottas and Zhou in scoring points. Both drivers probably would have had at least 2 or 3 points to the team's name by now, and maybe even 4 if Bottas's car hadn't broken down, trying to figure out the problems of 2023 by buying brand new equipment for the pit stops, which means that they can get their overall pit stop times down much further. Kind of like what Mercedes have had to do, since their pit stops have been incredibly woeful themselves last year, but not nearly as bad as Sauber's were, because last year, when Mercedes were on average around about 3 seconds or so, Alfa Romeo were at 3.85 seconds on average in terms of their average pit stop time. That's crazy slow. That's 1.2 seconds per pit stop on average slower than Red Bull. If Sauber have aspirations for the future as Audi to be near the front, they've got to fix their pit stops. And they are trying to, but it's just incredibly painful. They've changed their car concept. None of their parts from last year fit with this year's. It's all changed, and Sauber is being used as the test bed for Audi to make sure that all the bugs have been ironed out right now, meaning that when they come in 2026, there are as few gaffes as possible, and therefore they don't look embarrassing. Yeah, just use Sauber's name instead as a scapegoat. But you got to admit, there have been plenty of teething problems with this entire situation, because the teeth of the wheel guns meeting the screws on the wheels, they don't quite match up, and you get the idea. But this is a necessary change, and very vital, especially when you're in the bottom half of the grid, when these kind of pit stops can make the difference between you getting a chance at scoring points and then not. Suzuka was a great test of that. It was because of the quick pit stops of Racing Bulls, Yuki Tsunoda managed to leapfrog many of the other drivers around that pack, going from 11th through 15th, and he could then go on to score a point at his home circuit, him lauding the achievements of the pit crew, whereas Bottas, Sargent, they all had problems and they fell down the order and missed out on the chance of scoring a point, which to them is absolutely vital. It's a huge glaring blot in their form. Seriously, these two drivers need redemption. How can they show other teams that they are worth buying into if they can't really translate their qualifying potential and their initial race potential into proper results, meaning 11ths or points? It's really, really hard. The team has apologized for this, but you just get the sense that, really, this team is looking to the future, and Bottas and Zhou are elements of their past identity that they're probably looking to eschew themselves of. I just think that Andreas Seidel is not particularly enamored with either of these drivers since he didn't select them, he inherited them. And really, they're not going to be part of his overall plan when he becomes the Audi team CEO, since he's the current Sauber Group CEO. This lineup that he's inherited came from Alfa Romeo. It came from before his time when Fred Vasseur was the team principal, and he identified well with these two drivers. Valtteri Bottas he worked with in junior formulae, he could see the potential of his experience from Mercedes, and Fred probably worked very closely with his friend Toto Wolff to ensure that Hamilton's departing teammate would have a guaranteed seat and not lose out in the F1 rat race. Say what you will about Toto, I mean I do, but you gotta give him his dues here. He was incredibly classy with ensuring that Valtteri was taken care of. As for Zhou Guanyu, well, yeah, I mean, he's a perfectly fine driver. He's not terrible, but he's really not been setting the world alight. He's been relatively anonymous. I mean, the team hasn't held. They've been anonymous themselves. And you've really got to look at the brass tacks that the Chinese connection is incredibly strong. So many Chinese sponsors were connected to Zhou, reportedly $35 million a year. And for a team like Alfa Romeo, that's huge. That's incredibly immense and useful to have, because according to the 2024 Chinese Grand Prix ticket sales, they all sold out within 30 minutes because there's a Chinese driver. They made the most of the fact that Zhou was there. It's just probably not a part of Audi's plan. And this anonymity that Alfa Romeo have bestowed upon him has carried over to Drive to Survive, because the only worthy thing of note that Zhou has attached to himself in that series is that he's the guy what crashed that car in Silverstone so spectacularly in it. And all of this came to a head for me when Nico Hulkenberg was signed to join Sauber and then Audi next year on a multi-year deal. And Zhou wasn't expecting this news to come this early in the season either. Sure, he believes that there's still a place for him in F1 with Sauber, but the news that this caught him off guard somewhat means that the communication between the management and he is slowly starting to cool, almost to the point where they're expecting their incumbent drivers to either look elsewhere at another team or move out of F1 altogether. They probably don't care. It's most unfortunate for both of them because they've done the best they could with the tools that they've had, but Audi's commitment has gone into overdrive and they are making up for lost time. For many years, people were expecting that Audi were going to be a more majority outfit. The suspected plan would be a 75-25 split with Sauber, but now they're going to be owning the entire team. So Sauber as we know it is pretty much over. With BMW Sauber, there was still a partnership connected. Sauber lived on, whereas now it's going to just be Audi, not Audi Sauber, not Audi powered by Sauber engineering, just Audi. They are seemingly aiming very high with this opportunity to be part of one of the biggest single-seater series in the entire world. And part of that plan, according to Seidel I reckon, and his ambitions, is to sign the driver that worked so well with him when he became the team principal of McLaren, Carlos Sainz. He knows exactly what Carlos can do as the team leader as McLaren were going through their recovery phase. It's my own personal belief that McLaren are the only major team that has truly appreciated the efforts of Carlos without some sort of thing getting in the way. You would think that something would have been sorted out by now, but no, according to that, there is still nothing happening, and Audi have been incredibly patient. And even though Carlos has come out to deny rumours that he's rejected the Audi deal, asserting that there are many options up and down the grid and that he's merely waiting for the right elements to fall into place for him before committing, there are other mutterings coming about saying that he's already rejected the offer from Audi to join their works team as their leader. And this isn't just driving for them at all, this is a huge deal, something that Helmut Marko mentioned, and even though that's been disparaged by Aluni Bravi from Sauber, that this was a very lucrative deal, there could have also been connections with an ambassadorship deal. That's something similar to what his father has with the rallying division. And of course, well, a very long-term contract with them. But at the same time, Sainz has very much asserted the positive side of Audi, stating how much success his father has had with them, and that whenever the VW group has truly applied itself to something, they usually go on to succeed at it. Okay, that is quite complimentary, so maybe it's sort of a halfway house that maybe Sainz hasn't fully rejected the Audi deal, but it's probably not the first deal that has come to mind for him, that there might be better deals in the offing for him that he might want to have over the likes of this German automaker. One option seems quite chaotic, and I would personally love to see it. Of course I would, I think you would too. Him against Max Verstappen at Red Bull, that would be amazing. But I think right now Christian Horner is looking for a feeling of continuity. Maybe signing Checo on for one more year, trying to steady the ship in the wake of Adrian Newey cutting off ties with the F1 division. He's not going to be working with the F1 team anymore, just the technology group, which is working on the RB17 hypercar. That's how the gardening leave thing is working. No working on F1 machinery for 12 months, and then he can go and work for another team immediately after at the beginning of 2025. As for Mercedes, well, at best in my own opinion, I think it's just a stepping off point where Carlos could remain at the top of the grid somewhat for about another year or so before then he can consider his options for 2026. But you've just got to look at the bigger picture here, that Toto is looking for one of two things. Either he can sign up Kimi Antonelli for 2025 because, just look at what he's been doing. He's been comparing Imola lap times between Kimi and Lewis and saying how close they are, that Kimi is almost as good as Lewis in that particular car. Just imagine what he can do in a W16. And I still stand by the fact that later on this year, we will see Antonelli in a W15 in FP1 at Monza, 5 days after his birthday. I know you're probably sick and tired of me saying it, but I stand by it. And when I am proven right, I'll be right here. But maybe Carlos knows something that we don't. Maybe these rumors are true. Maybe Max will go to Mercedes over Red Bull. And that leaves a seat open that Carlos could easily fill over Daniel Ricciardo. It could be Checo and Sainz at Red Bull. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's what he's hoping for. That Max may bail on that Milton Keynes team and he could swoop in as their savior, after me personally thinking that he was the one that destabilized the Red Bull Junior program at the very beginning when he left in 2017. He could be the one to fix it again. But this is a really risky maneuver. It could pay dividends if it works, but it probably won't, because Max has not really shown any sentiment to Mercedes other than saying, Toto's been saying really nice stuff about me, tee-hee, but that's it. That's all he said. And he wants to be in the best machinery, and the Mercedes car isn't. So in my own opinion, I think Carlos is just holding out for the best seat, which is not available to him right now. And if he's not careful, Audi might simply just give up on him and look to another driver, meaning that Carlos is out of a seat for a year. And that would be incredibly shocking. But if that does happen, it is down to Carlos's own hubris, believing he's the flavor of the month right now, and that means he stalls for a seat and then he doesn't get it, and then he doesn't get anything, not even at a lower team. That would be the biggest slice of humble pie I would have to make him. No, those pancakes I mentioned earlier. But he's also got to remember that this isn't a one-way street. Audi is not a simple small outfit. This is a huge German automaker with big ambitions. If Carlos takes too long and their patience runs incredibly thin, almost too thin, and it breaks, then they can easily go and find another driver. Because if Carlos keeps stalling and all of the other seats are then filled up, then Audi's left without any options. That maybe Esteban Ocon, who's also been considered, might be snapped up by another team. That many other hopefuls might be out of their own consideration. And that we'd have to keep one of our own, I suppose, and maybe they might keep Bottas for another year because, he's marketable because of his, mullet and his propensity for not wearing any chaps. But I really don't see that happening either, because Bottas has also been subjected to sideswipes, because for the Miami Grand Prix, his race engineer, Alex Chan, has been replaced without him being consulted. He had no idea. According to Valtteri, it was a sudden change that was out of his hands. He's been seeing people come and go, move to different departments. The entire team is metamorphosing around him, and he doesn't really have much say about what happens in it. He's just a bystander, as is Zhou. He's just there because he's contracted to be there for this year. And even though he has tried his best over the last 12 months or so to convince Audi that he's worth keeping for another year, he's also been busy talking to multiple teams himself. And for the lower half of the grid, Bottas is still a decent catch. He's still got plenty of experience from Mercedes. He's just not been able to translate that experience into full-on points after the first half of 2022 for Alfa Romeo. So Bottas is worth considering, and at least he's being smart enough to look elsewhere instead of holding on blindly that Audi would keep him, because they're not going to. I don't think Sauber are that bothered at the moment because they've got plans for other drivers. Hulkenberg has already been signed. They love Hulkenberg. They loved him in 2013. They lost him to Force India, but now they got him back. And now, as Hulkenberg has said, he can sense a sort of redemption. He's already saying the party lines. You can tell that he's been loving this. And also, Seidel has become more and more vocal this year. He's been saying what Audi can bring to the Formula One table, having been really anonymous in 2023. I think I barely saw him in the garage at any race. He barely said anything. Aluni Bravi, the team representative, was the one that talked to the media most of the time. Seidel was just in the background. Maybe it's because he's been working on many things and now he can start saying what he's been working on. He's now mentioned that Sauber is looking to increase its workforce by 50%, and he's been working hard to gather talent from other teams, probably keen to work with a works team such as Audi, with the CEO saying they have managed to hire top people from almost every manufacturer. I mean, come on, that makes perfect sense. Audi is a huge name, and any person up and down the grid who is a relative junior with very little prospects of getting promoted anytime soon might look at that and go, oh, I want some of that. It's exciting, it's optimistic, especially given the power unit side of the 2026 regulations. They have been written in favour of Audi. They want Audi Formula One, and Audi want to be in it because These rules have been written with them in mind as well as Honda to keep them sweet, to bring more power unit suppliers to the table, to add a sense of variety, spiciness, uncertainty about which sort of manufacturer will be good and which ones wouldn't be so good. But the fact that Audi has sort of been tailor-made to this entire arrangement, that's got to count for something in the eyes of many future employees, that, ooh, Audi might have an advantage here. But you got to admit that all those pit stop issues, they've been incredibly embarrassing for a team that should know better. But at least they've been trying to adapt, and I just don't think Audi really cares at the moment, because Sauber is just a brand now. Sauber is no more. It is Audi, that team. They have just kept the Sauber branding as they start to develop things in the background. They got the likes of Filet Mignon and Kick as a sort of financial backup, just in case Audi did pull the plug and they would have been on their bum, but they would have had this huge company with billions of dollars that they just seem to have coming out of their pockets, and that would have been their financial safety net in case things did go south. But they're not going to go south. So just use this silly little brand as a cover for them working on stuff. It's a safety curtain. They can just work behind the scenes, get everything ready for 2026, and then they can look incredibly competent. Audi can look incredibly solid, and they'll score some really solid points at the expense of Bottas, Zhou, and Sauber. Basically, it's a throwaway identity for Seidel, and the drivers are expendable. I know it's incredibly harsh of me to say. It's unfair for Bottas and Zhou. Of course it is, but you gotta look at Audi. They want the best. They can hire the best. They want to hire Carlos Sainz, but Carlos Sainz is vacillating. He wants something better. And therefore, that is going to be a bit of a slap in the face for Seidel, but he's then got to be real and look for other drivers that might be really good. Sauber is fading away from the annals of F1 history, and that's why I don't think Théo Pourchaire has got any hope of getting into F1 with them. 2024 would have been his last chance, as Sauber had some sense of identity. But, as Théo said, he was almost there, but then Zhou pipped him, because, again, money, contracts, sponsorships, financial safety net in case Audi bailed, that $35 million a year, and the fact that there was a Chinese Grand Prix, that was huge in terms of Sauber merch sales. You got to admit, you saw all of that. It was mostly green in the grandstands with the number 24. Absolutely mad. But hey, at least Théo hasn't given up. He's been quite busy. He's over in IndyCar driving for McLaren, subbing for them, and actually doing pretty well. And he's also in Super Formula this year. So I'm glad he's being proactive, that he's not wallowing in self-pity or working as a reserve driver for Aston Martin. Poor Felipe. If what Seidel is saying is true, then the ambition of Audi is incredibly massive, and they do have the financial and reputational clout to back it up, now fully utilising it and getting things in motion. 2024 will be a year of growing pains that they will gladly suffer through, kind of like what Williams is doing for the next couple of years before 2026. Valve's not really minding too much if they fall back a little bit, because they've really got to change things behind the scenes to make things current and up to date, having used 20-year-old technology. Sauber's sort of doing the same thing, albeit maybe not as extreme as that. There are no Excel spreadsheets here. But probably Sauber, if they end up 9th place this year, whatever. Doesn't really matter. They can use that extra ATR time to help them. But they're looking to 2026, as is every single other team. You might get one or two teams pulling a Hail Mary for 2025 to get some extra prize money, but that might be few and far between. Audi's looking to be good in 2026, so I can easily see 2025 being somewhat of a transitional year as well. Maybe that's what is putting off Sainz, but hey, he's got to think for the future. But he's also thinking about Red Bull. That might be a future, but that's incredibly risky, and Sainz could easily end up with nothing. And that is something I don't want to see, but in a way, if it does happen, then that's on him. Or if they don't end up with Sainz and there's no other drivers that they really want, then I guess they could keep Bottas, but it would only be grudgingly so. And I bet it would only be a 1-year contract, and then Bottas, the flashbacks, it would all come flooding back again. I think Seidel would rather not do that. Much like how Ferrari and Lewis Hamilton would rather not talk about 2025 right now, but the media will keep asking them anyway. Find out why I think this problem is not going to go away anytime soon, and this will be a constant headache for them, by going to watch this video next, right now, and I will see you there after I change my clothes.